Hey everybody, it's Randy with Low Buck LS here again, and this week we're going to be installing the hooker cast manifolds and crossover pipe and do some fabricating on the hot side and stuff for the turbo of my Low Buck truck. If you've been following my channel for a bit, you know I built my own manifold, but it works, but it's not up to my standards, I guess. I think when I welded it up, the heat kind of warped the flange a bit where it bolts to the head, so it's got some exhaust leaks and doesn't sound that great. So I'm gonna go with the hooker cast manifold. So I'll flip the camera around here and we'll get started. Okay, so first of all, to get ready for installing these new manifolds, I'm gonna take off my charge pipe, take my wastegate off, and unbolt the turbo from the flange down here and get all of that out of the way. So I will get started on that. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the turbo out of there, and it is sitting on my garbage can here. So I think I am going to, it's getting kind of late in the evening here, so I'm going to back this thing out of the garage the way it is. It's going to be a little loud, but should be, like I said, I've got that oil line capped off. So, and then tomorrow we'll bring it back in the garage and we will take off this homemade log manifold and the crossover pipe and the factory exhaust manifold on this side and get to work on installing the hooker cast manifolds and crossover pipe. So we'll call her a night for tonight and pick this back up tomorrow. Okay, so it is another day. I've got my truck pulled back into the garage here. I've already climbed under and taken the crossover pipe off from underneath. Now I'm going to take the spark plug wires off, the spark plugs, and take out those bolts that hold the manifold to the head, and then we'll get this, my homemade log manifold, out of here. Okay, so I got that homemade manifold out of there, and you can see there's definitely, you can tell there was exhaust leaks. Like, you can see the staining around the ports there, that it definitely was. And then if you look over here at the manifold, yeah, it's obvious. You can see the gasket damage there, and by the way it's stained, that it was definitely having issues. That gasket's blown out there. So, but I think the problem is when I welded it, I didn't have this flange bolted down to anything. So if you're gonna make one of these manifolds, I'd recommend bolting this flange to like a steel table or something before you weld it, and hopefully that would have kept this flange nice and straight and saved me from these exhaust leak issues. So now we're gonna work on pulling the manifold off on the other side. Okay, so like I said, we're gonna tackle the driver's side now, which still has the factory log manifold on it. So I'm going to pull these spark plug boots off and then take these bolts out that hold the manifold to the head. Okay, so I got that driver's side factory manifold off, and this side you can see wasn't leaking, which is surprising because if you look right down there, you can see a broken exhaust bolt that's still stuck in the head. So I'm gonna have to try and weld a nut to that and get it out. And then at the back end, it was missing a bolt, but doesn't look like it was leaking. And if we look over here, That's the manifold there, and gasket's in good shape, and doesn't look like this side was leaking. So GM is better at building manifolds than I am. Theirs don't leak. So I think I'm gonna call it a night again here, and tomorrow we'll work on getting these. I'll work on getting that stud out that's stuck in the head there, and getting these gasket surfaces cleaned up, and then we can work on getting those hooker cast turbo manifolds out of the box and bolted onto the head. So we'll pick up again tomorrow. Talk to you soon. Okay guys, so what I'm gonna do now is attempt to get this broken exhaust manifold bolt out of the head. So I've got basically what I'm gonna do is I've got a 3/8 nut, just a regular hardware store nut. I'm gonna put it over top of the broken stud, and then I've got my MIG welder here. I'm just gonna weld that nut to the stud, and then I should be able to put a 9/16 socket on there and spin it out, hopefully. One thing I wanted to mention is if you're welding, especially on these newer vehicles with computers and shit, you want to keep your ground clamp as close to the work area where you're welding as possible. So I've threaded in one of the manifold bolts that wasn't broken into the hole beside it here, and you can see I got my ground clamp hooked on there. And the reason you want it as close as possible is there's the computer that runs your engine right there. So if I were to hook the ground clamp up, I don't know, over on this bolt or something, it could cause a large amount of current to flow through that computer, and probably wouldn't be happy with that. So, and it's probably not as big of a deal on older vehicles that don't have the computers and stuff, but still a good practice. Just keep your ground clamp as close to the area that you're welding. So I will shut off the camera and fire up the welder, and we'll get that nut tacked on, and then we'll see if it comes out of the head. So see you in a bit. Okay, so I was able to get that broken loose with the socket. Now I'll just thread it the rest of the way out by hand here. And there you have it. The nut welded onto that stud to get it out. And I'll take my ground clamp off here. Take out this other stud or bolt. And oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to point out. I bought, so basically what I'm going to do now is clean up these gasket surfaces here. And then I've got, oh, there's a little, while we're snooping around in parts here, give you guys a little sneak preview of what we got there, eh? That'll be a future video coming up. But what I was coming over here for is I got these Rem Flex RFL 2049, and they're like a real thick, you'll see it when I get them out of the package here, but oh, you can see it right there. Like, they're a good 1/8 of an inch thick, and they compress and fill any irregularities or whatever in your surface. So I bet if I would have used these on my old cast manifold there, that I probably wouldn't have had near as many leaks as I did. So so we got these new Rem Flex gaskets to go on, and then I also got this Dorman 03413B, or I think they have 03413 without the B, and I think that just means it doesn't come with the box. The B is for box, I guess. But anyways, that's the factory LS exhaust manifold bolt, and then this has like a bigger head on it, and it's like a better finish and stuff on it. So got a new set of those when we put those manifolds on. So yeah, I'll get them gasket surfaces cleaned up and we'll get ready to put these manifolds on. Okay, so I've got those gasket surfaces all cleaned up on the side of the head where the new manifolds are gonna mount up, and I just cut a piece of like Scotch-Brite pad and just polished it up. So we'll go have a look at the other side here. And a little maneuver in here. There's the other surface. It was a little hard to reach the back by the firewall there, but got that surface all cleaned up. Now the other big obstacle that I'm going to have a problem with here is this air conditioning compressor is going to be right in the way of that manifold. That's one of the downsides of the hooker cast manifolds, is they don't work with your air conditioning in the stock location on the Chevy trucks. So I'm going to I think I'm going to have to run down to Canadian Tire, and I'm going to get a fitting that goes on here to like depressurize the air conditioning lines. So that's how you can tell I'm up in Canada. Like the guys in the States run down to AutoZone and get their cheap Chinese tools from Harbor Freight, and up here we run to Canadian Tire and get our cheap Chinese tools from Princess Auto. So I will be back and with the right fitting and gauge and stuff, and depressurize these air conditioning lines. So talk to you in a bit. Okay, so I went and picked up this deal here. It's a Red Tech AC recharge gauge kit from Canadian Tire. So I'll take it out of the package here and then hook it up to these ports on the air conditioning line and just see how much pressure's in there, and then I should be able to just crack this valve and bleed the pressure out of the system before I start breaking lines apart. So I'll do that next. Okay, so I got that little gauge deal out of the package there, and I guess it doesn't go on that fitting right there. I tried putting it on there and it doesn't fit, but it does fit on that fitting back there. And once I plug that in, you can see I've got like, well, I don't know, 57 psi of pressure in the system. So if you didn't have some way of bleeding that down in a controlled way, you know, you can't just crack the lines apart. You'd have all, I guess you could if you were, but it's better to depressure it in a controlled manner, I think. So I'll set up the camera on the tripod here so I can use both hands, and then we'll depressure that system. So hang on. Okay, so like I said, I've got this gauge plugged in there. Now I'm gonna just slowly crack open this valve, and we should see that pressure drop to 0. And I'd recommend wearing gloves because this refrigerant's gonna come out of here at 60 pounds or whatever. But I guess we'll be doing it in a controlled manner. You can see that pressure coming down there. Oh, I think I'm gonna need like a bucket or a tray or something, so hang on. Some oil and stuff coming out of there, so try and put it so you guys can still see the gauge. See that oil coming out of there? Oh, that doesn't, guess that's another tip. Don't breathe that stuff in. I'm probably like killing the environment or something too by just letting it go to atmosphere here like that. So I'm gonna crack this valve open again and not stand in the cloud of refrigerant coming out. Okay, I'll just get out of the way here and let that gas off. So I've sped up or fast forwarded the video here to not make you guys bored, but it actually took about 6 minutes into this part of the video of depressuring this, so it did take longer than I expected to depressure the system, but you can hear it's pretty well down to a whisper coming out of there now. So yeah, it's pretty well depressured, so I'll get this pan out of here. And it's still a whisper coming out of there, so I'll let that go a little longer. But now I'll grab the camera and set it up in a different angle, and we'll work on getting that air conditioning compressor out of there. So now I'm going to take this bolt out here down on the air conditioning compressor, and I think that's like a manifold type of thing. I think I've never actually taken this apart before, but I think if I take that bolt out, these lines will come off the compressor here, so I'll give that a try. So I got those lines out of there. Now adjust it here. Now we should be able to go in and start taking that compressor out of here. So I'm gonna go around to the front, and I think this is the tensioner here. So I'm gonna put a, oh, I'm not holding the camera very good. Let me try and move it down there a bit. Basically, I'm gonna put a 3/8 ratchet and extension into that hole and kind of pry it down. And oh, look at how cracked and old that belt is. But anyways, I'm gonna pry that down and take the belt off, and then we should be able to undo the bolts and get that compressor out of there. Okay, so as you can see, I got the compressor out of there now, and I guess I did need to take that bolt out because this is a bracket assembly that holds the compressor. So now if I take that bolt out there, and then there's one more on the front here, and if I take those two out, I should be able to pull this whole bracket assembly off. So that's what I'm gonna do next. Okay, bracket is off, and I guess I didn't have to take that bolt out. That just holds the tensioner on. So these 4 bolt holes hold the compressor onto the bracket, and then these 3 bolts hold the bracket to the side of the engine block down there. So bracket's off. Now we've hopefully got room for that manifold to wrestle in there. So I'll have to pull them plug wires off again. Had to fire the truck up with no manifolds on it to back it out of the garage a little bit. So she was loud. So pull them plug wires off, and then we'll try and get that manifold in place. Okay, you can see I've got that passenger side manifold roughly in place there. You got to put the dipstick tube through the second to last hole between the runners there. I will I've got my Rem Flex Gaskets here ready to go. Get them out of the package, and the part number on them again is RFL 2049. And I got my Dorman bolt kit all ready to go there, and I'll put copper coat or Nical or something on them to keep the threads from galling up. So we will go ahead and get this manifold bolted onto the side of the head. Okay guys, I ran into a snag here when I was trying to bolt the manifold up. This plate that's attached to the motor mount there is interfering, won't let me bolt the manifold tight to the side of the head. So I'm hoping I can just grind out these 2 rivets or whatever they are that hold this plate on, and that will give me enough clearance. I'm hoping it's not the motor mount itself that is causing my clearance issue. So I'm going to start by pulling the manifold back out of the engine bay here and grinding off those 2 rivets there. And we'll try it again here and see if we can get that manifold to fit. But right now it's a bit of a disappointment, but we'll try to get that plate out of there, and hopefully that works. Okay, I got those rivets taken out of there and got this plate. Just got the grinder in there and ground them rivet heads off. So I hope that gives me enough clearance. I'm going to try to put that manifold in there again and see if it sits flush with the side of the head. Okay, so unfortunately, taking that plate off didn't solve my issue. You can see right there on the motor mount, that shiny spot is where the manifold was rubbing on it when I was trying to put it on the side of the manifold. And then on the bottom of the manifold, you can see a dirty spot there where it was rubbing on the motor mount. So I am not sure how I'm gonna fix this. Okay, so as you can see, I've got this motor mount out, and we're gonna have to modify it somehow. And I've just got a jack. Well, you can see the end of it underneath the truck there. The other side motor mount is still attached, and then I got a jack underneath the engine just holding it up while I've got this motor mount out. So I guess we'll take her on the bench and see what we can do to modify it here. Okay, so I've got my motor mount out on the bench here. So basically I'm going to cut it here and cut it where I have this line marked, and that should give another 1/2 inch of clearance. But then I'm going to have to basically convert this from a rubber mounted mount to a solid mount by bridging steel from here to here. So I'll get started cutting that apart, and we'll pick up again in a little bit here. Again, turned into way more work than I expected. Okay, so I made one cut there. Now I'm gonna make this cut right here. And now you can see I've got that piece trimmed off of there. Chopped off there. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now I've got that other piece trimmed off there. Now I'm going to cut this piece off right across there. And then I'll do a test fit before I weld it up solid. Make sure it'll clear that manifold. So now you can see I've got that piece cut out of there. Now I'm going to throw it back in the truck for a minute and throw a couple bolts in, and then try that manifold in there and see if it clears now. Okay, there you can see my modified motor mount back in the truck, just with the bolts in loose. And now I'm going to test fit that manifold again and see if it clears now. And then we'll pull that motor mount back out and weld it up solid. So throw that manifold in, and hopefully it's got clearance now. Okay, so I've got that manifold back in, and the good news is now it fits up tight to the cylinder head there and clears the motor mount. So now I'll pull that manifold back out of there and we'll weld up that motor mount solid. Okay, so this is how I'm going to make these mounts solid. I've got a couple pieces here cut of I think it's 1/8 by 3/4. This one's 1 1/4 inch long. It's just going to go in right there and get welded basically between the two halves of the mount. And then I got this angled piece cut here that is basically going to sit right there, and that should basically turn that into a solid motor mount. So yeah, I'll get those welded up. And same thing on the other side. There's a angled piece and a 1 1/4 inch piece. So I'll get them welded up and we'll get this mount back in the truck and then get that manifold on. Okay, and there is my now solid motor mount. Again, welds aren't pretty, but they don't need to be. Nobody will see it behind that manifold anyways. So there's my new solid motor mount installed back in the truck. So now I can take the jack out from underneath the engine and we should be able to bolt that manifold in there. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, as you can see, I've actually got this manifold on finally. I've just got the bolts hand tight for now, and I've also got, we'll go around the other side here, I've got the same thing. I've got the driver's side manifold on hand tight as well, so making progress here. Now I'm going to, before I torque those down, I'm going to jack the truck up and go underneath and put the crossover pipe on, because those manifolds might need to move a little bit one way or the other in order to mate up with the crossover pipe. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, so now I'm ready to put that crossover pipe on. So I've got the truck up on a ramp so I can get underneath it. And there is the crossover pipe and the V-band clamps. So I'm gonna crawl under the truck and throw that on. Okay, I'm underneath the truck now, and there you can see the driver's side manifold and the flange I'm going to bolt the crossover pipe to. And right up there you can see the passenger side one. So, okay, so I got that crossover pipe installed underneath the truck. There's the connection on the passenger side. And let me move the light over here. There's the connection on the driver's side. Okay, so I went ahead and torqued all those bolts. Whoops, there goes my torque wrench. That hold the manifolds to the head to 20 foot-pounds, just like it says on the package. And you can kind of see how that graphite gasket is like squished and compressed, and how it would fill any gaps or whatever in the surface of the manifold or the head. So now manifolds are on, crossover pipe is in. We got to work on, there's the outlet of the manifold right there where the air conditioning compressor used to be, and I'm gonna have to take out this tray here and get rid of this reservoir here, because that's kind of where my turbo is gonna sit, right in this corner of the engine compartment, and hopefully draw cold air in from, I'll either take this headlight out or it'll suck air in right from there. But basically manifolds are on. Now it's just fabricating the hot side and mounting the turbo and replumbing the oil feed lines. I think I can just extend that a little bit. I think there's actually some slack. Should be able to get enough room to pull it over here and then plumb a new, there's my old oil drain line wrapped in the fire sleeve there, so I'll run a new drain hose for the turbo here too. So that's what we'll work on next. Okay, so now we're gonna work on connecting that 3-inch V-band on the end of the manifold to get the turbo sitting in the general vicinity of where it's going to be. And in order to do that, I'm going to use these parts right here. Let me just put down a little light in the other hand here. So I've got another T4 flange that I got water jet cut at a local place here, and then I'm going to tap out these holes to accept the bolts, so it'll bolt up to the turbo. I've got a short radius 3-inch elbow. It is, I think there's a part number on here somewhere. See if we can see it here. Nelson, what is it? There we go. Nelson 89091A is the part number on that. And then I've got a 45 here, which is a Nelson 89083A. So I think what I'm gonna do is put that 3-inch V-band on there, and then put the this 90-degree elbow on there first, and then the 45-degree elbow will kind of be welded on there like that, and then put this flange on the end of that 45-degree elbow. So I'm just gonna try and piece that together here now. So I went to test fit up my pipe here with the V-band welded on, and I noticed it was fitting real sloppy, so I discovered something I just wanted to show you guys here. These are both 3-inch V-band clamps, but look at the difference in width of that groove there. So I was using this V-band clamp and it just wasn't tightening up. There was all kinds of slop in the joint. And the other thing I noticed is I've got two different, like, look at the difference in thickness of, so I was using this thin flange with this wide clamp, and so there was, it basically wouldn't have sealed up. It would have had an exhaust leak for sure. So I cut that V-band. That was the one that was welded on to my pipe here. So I cut that one off, and I'm gonna weld this one on and make sure to use this clamp with the narrower groove. And I'm also gonna add about an inch or so onto this pipe just to give a little bit more clearance from that radiator hose. So I'm gonna cut a 1-inch piece here, weld it on, and, oops, making a racket here, and then weld this 3-inch V-band onto there. So that's what I'll do next. Okay, so I've got that piece all welded up. Now I gotta tap out these holes, and then we should be able to mount up the turbo. Okay, so I got that flange tapped out, and I got the turbine housing of the turbo bolted onto there, as you can see. I took the center section and compressor side off of the turbo just to make it easier to get to those two bolts right there. So now I'm gonna have to get that metal tray out of there. And yeah, I don't like how that piece of pipe for the wastegate, the angle that it comes off the turbo there. So I think I've still got the piece of turbine housing that I cut out from that hole, so I might cut that pipe off there and try and plug the hole and weld it on at a different angle. So I'll do that, and then take that black tray out of there and take it from there. Okay, so I got that wastegate port welded on there onto the turbine housing at a better angle. So now we're gonna bolt it up, and I've got another one of these Rem Flex Gaskets for the T4 flange. That'll go right on there, and it is a part number 18-006. So we'll go ahead and get that turbo bolted up to the piece that connects it to the manifold there. Okay, so we got that turbo bolted in there, and got the wastegate on. I'll show you from a couple different angles here. Now, gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with the downpipe, and figure out how to connect my oil drain hose back to the oil pan here. This oil feed has enough slack in it. If I cut the zip ties, I'll be able to hook it up, no problem, but I have to do a bit of thinking about how I'm gonna run the oil drain here. Okay, now I'm gonna plumb in the drain hose for the turbo. So I'm gonna use this Aeroquip, here, FC98. It's a -10 hose, and then I'm gonna use this. It's AN10 45-degree fitting. That'll thread onto the bottom of the turbo and kind of direct the hose back. And then this is like a push lock style fitting. The hose will just push onto this barb type thing. And then at the oil pan end, I'm going to thread in this 1/2 inch NPT to AN10 fitting with a straight AN10 push lock. And then when it goes past the manifold and the turbo, I'm going to put a piece of this fire sleeve on there to protect the hose in the areas where it's hot. So I'll jack up the truck now and we'll get that drain hose installed. Now I'm going to take this fitting and basically shove it into the end of that hose. This will be the end that's going to connect down at the oil pan. And that is what the hose looks like with that fitting shoved into it. And then I got a piece of that fire sleeve over top of it where it's going to be passing by the manifold. And there you can see I've got the drain hose hooked up to that fitting on the side of the oil pan. So now we'll go up top and hook up the end on the turbo. There you can see that line hooked up to the turbo, and I'm just going to slide this fire sleeve up and like zip tie it or tie wire it around there to protect the rubber hose from the heat from the turbine housing here. So that should be pretty well done for our oil drain. I just got to hook up this oil feed line to the top here, and then I could actually drive the truck if I wanted to. I've just this where the downpipe connects here is going to be blowing into the engine compartment, so that'll be the next thing I work on is first hook up this oil feed line, and then we'll work on fabricating the downpipe. Okay, I'm getting ready to finish this up here. Been doing some thinking. I think I'm just going to do the Fender exit exhaust, so I'm going to put this 3-inch V-band welded onto this Nelson 3-inch elbow. I've got the part for you again. It is a Nelson 89091A. So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna have that coming off the turbo with a 3-inch V-band, then go straight out the fender here and have another one of these elbows basically as a bullhorn kind of angled up like that, so that way when I'm on the two-step I can see the flames shooting out of it. But anyways, that's what I'm going to do now. I'll start by getting this V-band tacked onto this elbow, and then we'll cut a short straight chunk of pipe and blast a hole in the fender. Okay, so I got that 3-inch short radius elbow tacked onto a V-band, and then I just took a piece of scrap pipe and tacked it onto that 3-inch elbow just so I can have an idea of where to make my hole here. So now I'll get that marked out and start cutting my hole. So I basically got marked out where my hole needs to be through the fender. It's a little tricky to mark because that surface isn't flat, obviously, so but I think I got her get a hole in the ballpark there anyway. So I'll pull this piece out and we'll get our hole saw and blast a hole in the inner fender there. Okay, so apparently hole sawing through that inner fender is harder than it looks. You can see I'm tearing it up and making a mess of it, and I've got a whole pile of bent and broken drill bits. Just because that surface isn't smooth, it keeps catching on the edge of this holding bracket for the water cooler. So basically I marked out kind of a perimeter, and I'm just going to put a zip disc in my grinder and cut that out. Alright, so I got this piece cut out, and I'm finding out that there is some structure in behind this in the hole there, so that's gonna be right in my way. So I'm trying to decide how I'm gonna do this. I might I don't know, maybe if I drill my hole saw from the outside, it might work, but I don't want to completely mangle the fender from the outside. Like, I don't really care what it looks like in here, but it'd be nice to have a nice clean hole on the outside. But I think that's what I'm going to try and do, is drill through from this way. So I got that hole cut in the fender, turned out okay, but there is some, you can see that structure in there, so I'm going to keep going with my hole saw and try and cut through that. We'll see if we can do that without making a mess. And there we go, we got our hole cut. You can see that big piece of inner fender in there that I had to cut through on both sides. She goes straight through. I'll just clean up them edges with a file a bit, and we'll work on getting that bullhorn ran out. Alright, so I got my, I cut a longer piece of pipe here and welded it onto my 3-inch elbow that's attached to my V-band that's going to come off the turbo. And I cut it just long enough so it's basically flush with the fender, maybe a little bit inside. And then I'm just going to weld this another 3-inch elbow on there to kind of make a bullhorn. And we have ourselves a down pipe. I got her all welded together here, so stick through just like that. So I'll get that V-band put on and get the wastegate put back on. We'll talk to you in a bit. And that is what it looks like installed. Got the wastegate back on. Still got to plumb in the boost line, but I should be able to fire this thing up, and I want to back it out of the garage and hear what it sounds like, so we'll do that and then we'll wrap up this video. Okay, here's how it sounds when the truck's running. I'll just hop inside for a second and rev it up. Even that loud, I'm fairly surprised. Shut the truck up off for a second here. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Hooker manifold is installed, as you can see there. Obviously I've got to do something about that coolant reservoir, get rid of it, I guess. And obviously we've got to do our charge piping between the turbo and the throttle body. And we are also going to incorporate an intercooler into there, and we've got that cam install coming up. I'm going to have to put a O2 sensor in this down pipe. We're going to have to figure out some form of boost control. I eventually want to get back to that Arduino boost controller I was working on a few months back, but for now I'll probably just put a Turbo Smart manual boost controller or something. But yeah, I apologize that this video took so long to come out, just with issues of having to get rid of the air conditioning, having to modify the motor mounts there. This video has taken me about a month to make, but I'm going to start doing more videos, like shorter videos, more often. I just kind of wanted to do this one all at once. So there's still snow on the ground here, as you can see. It's the beginning of May up here in Canada. Local track isn't open yet, but it opens on May 26th. So we've got a lot of we definitely want to get this coolant system figured out, get our intercooler installed, and get our cam swap done in the next couple of weeks. So should see lots of videos coming up. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you guys on the next one.